This is Nina Bode from Future Female Zurich, and today we're discussing the topic, the future of new work. It's a very hot topic on the lips of everybody, and the change of COVID. This is what exactly COVID changes our mindset, our workspace, how we live, how we work, what we choose to have in life. So, in terms of our work, our working relationship. And today we have this discussion with Isabel Litzler and, of course, Alida Tepelea, where we will talk about this. Is remote working the new in? I think that is very fascinating, since we are choosing so many different styles of living our lives these days that makes fit for us and not just the corporation. And actually, a few interesting facts that I found from the OWL Lab. During COVID, 70% of individuals worked from home. And I think that was in most countries. And I think in some countries, it must have been 90% or probably 100%. After COVID, 92% or 93% decided that actually they would like to work from home 1 day a week. 1 day a week, which means it's a 4-day work week. Now, I think in Germany, in Switzerland, and many other countries, they are slowly adapting to this mindset. And then, of course, a whopping 23% said, you know what? We would actually prefer to take a 10% pay cut in order to work from home permanently, which I think is very, very interesting. And then, of course, 80% said, you know what, we would like to work 3 days a week from home and 2 days a week in the office. I mean, that's very interesting. But in order to move forward and have a bit more of this conversation on the go, let's talk to our two guest speakers, Isabel Litzler and Alida Tepelea. Alida, I'm going to give you the stage and say, please introduce yourself to everyone who will join and who will join this broadcast, and just give us a little bit of a background. Then, now, look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, Nina, for inviting me, and thank you, Future Females, for the opportunity. Indeed, I think remote work is something that is here to stay. Many employers still don't want to kind of realize it, but I think employees have already made their choice. And I mean, there are many benefits, in terms of commute, in terms of convenience, in terms of, not having many burdens that we used to have in the corporate world. Myself, I come from the corporate world originally. So after studying business administration in Vienna, I worked for large corporations like Procter & Gamble, Novartis, BlackRock in Geneva, Basel, and Zurich in Switzerland. So I saw it a little bit, how it looks like. And I liked it initially, but eventually I ended up being an entrepreneur. So I'm working in 2 startups now, one which I co-founded and one which I'm co-managing. And so I made this kind of 180 degrees change. And I like to say, and I'm proud to say, that I already did remote work before it was cool. So I kind of did this exit from the corporate world in end 17, beginning of 2018. And since then, I've been working remotely, I've been working digitally, and I never look back, and I'm still enjoying it.
Alida, I'm going to ask you one question, actually. Which generation do you fit into in terms of?
I don't know if it's X, Y, or Z or whatever it's called these days, but I'm 33 years old, so you can put me in the bucket that you would like to.
Okay, so that is definitely X. Thank you so much for that introduction. Isabel, I'm going to put it over to you now.
Okay. Yeah, so basically I worked in my entire life in human resources. I started my career actually in Los Angeles in California. So I really enjoyed the city. I had the great luck of living and working there for many years. Then I came to Paris and finally to Switzerland in 2007. What I really enjoyed about corporate world and working in human resources was all the projects I was given, and I worked with high tech already at the time, and working in many exciting things around recruitment and talent management. But finally, what happened to me after all this experience, which was great, I realized what I love in this life and what motivates me is to help other people find what it is that their mission is in this world. So helping people grow their skills, develop their potential. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And that was already a few years back. So 2015, since then, I've been really busy helping people find their path, helping them also discover who they are and what's the good fit for them. So I've been in touch also with working from home since then, because I realized that I'm a free agent. I like to work a little bit based on my own rhythm and based on connections that I make. So I realized that this is working for me. And this is actually leading into the topic today, is that that whole 9 to 5, and which I really enjoyed at some point because it gives you structure as well, and working with a team and everything. But I realized, especially if you're more of a free agent or someone who likes to do their own, build their own time and work on their own rhythm, I think it's a little bit complicated. And however, you're still very efficient. You're a different type of a person. And sometimes the corporate cut or the structure is not adapted to you. So I think that's where we need to be a little bit more open-minded. And that's what I love working on as well.
Exactly, Isabel. I mean, I just wanted to say, I mean, of course, how does this pillar of change after the pandemic, such as COVID, you know, home office is at the heart of our work-life culture now, like you say. And did this pandemic create this freedom of choice for employees? And what role do you believe this plays in organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people had time to think when they were at home. So they had time to realize, who am I? What is it that motivates me? Do I really actually like my job? Do I want to go back to it? So a lot of questions popped up. And at the same time, people started to realize that with a little bit of organization, you actually become very efficient from home. And I've actually interviewed entrepreneurs that became actually efficient when they moved their business into the home setting, as opposed to going out and meeting people, etc. So there's a notion of efficiency around working at home, and with the right tools, again, which took a little bit of time for companies to organize, but with the right tools, working from home can really be efficient. But again, it has to be there has to be some structure to some extent, and that's where now I think companies are going to look at putting more structure, understanding a little bit, what kind of tools do they need to put in place, what type of training, how do we keep some type of meetups with the employees so that we don't lose them in the shuffle, especially new hires. They need to be guided and they need to be engaged. So doing all this from a distance is still something to work on, I believe.
Absolutely. I think it definitely does. I think this transformation for organizations is probably such a big thing. Alida, what was it for you? You were obviously 2017. You were already you were getting into your entrepreneur mode, but you were before that organization. How did this make sense for you? And how do you think, these restrictions of always having to be in the office, having to take your lunch on time, how did this affect your productivity? And how has that changed now being an entrepreneur?
I think, I especially I was in organizations where I would say they were kind of structured and very formal, and the pharma industry and the asset management industry, especially in Switzerland, is like somewhat more uptight, to say the least. So you always go in a suit and you are perfectly on time, and it's very process driven, and those kind of typical stereotypes that come to mind when you think about the world of pharma, the world of finance, the world of Switzerland or Swiss culture. And then you simply save a lot of time. You don't have to commute to work, you don't have to put on a suit and a tie. You can organize your own day much more. You might still have team meetings, but our team meetings are much more casual in the startup settings, and this doesn't mean that we work less. It means more that we, for example, for us, the rule is that if someone doesn't necessarily need to be on a team meeting and instead he could do a client meeting, then of course that's more important. And it's not a mandatory thing that, I don't know, every morning at 10 o'clock everybody has to be on the team meeting, and that takes priority over, for example, a client meeting. So those things are, I would say, much more flexible, much more easy to handle, and simply save a lot of time. And it's also not just a time saving, but I would also say a quality of life that is gained, because it becomes easier and more convenient. And I mean, I hope that people feel better at home than they feel at work. It's good if they feel great at work, but usually your home is your home, and that's home is where your heart is, and the other way around. So I think this added convenience is something that we also see in the statistics that you said. People simply love it, and they would like to have more of it rather than less.
I agree with you. I think there's a lot of change that's taken. I mean, I had a conversation with someone the other day. He said to me, "I travel to work 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. That's 4 hours of your day. That's a lot." And actually, I had to laugh because when you mentioned Switzerland, some people travel halfway across from other cantons all the way to come to work in Zurich.
Yeah.
And then go back, and it's exactly that. It's exactly that sort of culture. I mean, I know in Johannesburg it was exactly the same thing. When I worked for Forbes and CNBC Africa, I get stuck in traffic in the morning. If I missed it, just that point, it's 3 hours in the traffic one way, 3 hours back. That's 6 hours of your day. It's a lot of time. So I think, in terms of home office, a lot of the productivity that there's a lot of time that we could utilize in terms of our sort of workday balance. And I think it's definitely the mindset that we need to start adapting. Organizations need to adapt this mindset. But just to move forward from that topic as well, I mean, the recruitment process these days has also changed, Isabel. You come from this background. Just what was that traditional recruiting process, and what is the mindset now? What's happening with this? Because essentially, what do organizations, HR, headhunters need to think about? And because the needs of the individual who is looking for that job has completely changed. And then I think, how difficult? What's the pros and cons on both ends? Because if people don't want to work, I mean, you told me an interesting story earlier. It's rather tricky, right?
Yeah, it is tricky because the thing is, things are moving very fast, and there used to be where companies wanted to hire for a job, a position with a job description. So that's what you hired for. I think now the difference is that companies want talents. They want people who are going to be adaptable, who are going to be mobile in every sense, flexible, mobile, able to pick up things quickly. I know when I worked the last couple of years for companies, the big thing was to have people that are going to be able to move around, so not necessarily stay in the same department or area of work. So I think now companies are going to want to hire talents, people who are flexible, who are able to learn new things, because things move so quickly now with digital that after a couple of months, you already need to learn new things. So companies will want to hire this kind of a mindset. So I think we're shifting from hiring for the hard skills, having the person who understands tools and has maybe a degree and so forth. Now I think companies, especially startups, and we have maybe we can hear more about that, but in startups especially, you want people that are going to be able to have the mindset, and the mindset is becoming more important than the skills, because the skills can always be taught. So if you need to learn a tool or some techniques or what have you, but the mindset to be able to work on different things simultaneously, to be very efficient, to understand how things connect together. I know I spend a lot of time with my corporate clients when I work in coaching, on making them connect the dots. A lot of people have a hard time with that. I'm talking to them and I'm like, yeah, and you see this here and that here, and they have a hard time sometimes because they're not used to that. We're used to working in silos and we're experts in one thing, and now the shift is that we have to become a little bit more understand how the world works and understand, how we can be an asset for an organization in what we can bring, and keep our skills in digital, especially. So digital skills are really the qualifications now to go for. So on both ends, from the employer and the person who's looking for a position right now, is keep up your skills, especially on digital, because that's going to be very, very important for recruiters to find already the talent that already knows how to use the tools, knows how to have that flexible mindset. And then on the side of finding talent, it can be very hard in certain fields. They're not finding enough people. So being also a bit more creative on recruitment side to find new ways of recruitment. I'm still very surprised where it hasn't changed that much in terms of the resume and the cover letter. And we have so many apps now, and I know there's a lot of startups that try to find ways now for the right fit, the right person for the right fit. It hasn't changed in all these years. The companies still look for the right fit. People still want to find a job that suits them, but we haven't really found the right way. I mean, we've tried different things. We've tried assessments. We've done a lot of interviews. Recruiters do a lot of interviews. Now we do more online searches for profiles. Headhunters do that. And sourcing and all these things. But in the end, it's all about matching cultures, I think, and mindset. So companies have a certain way of working, and they want to find people that are the same tribe. Simon Sinek is someone that I would encourage everyone to read, because he talks about that, the culture, and how it's important to find people like you to mesh. And that's really if you want to build strong teams, that's really where it starts, with finding people with similar mindset and values. And that's where you can bring your good teams together. So it's not about job descriptions and, doing trying to interview and all that. I mean, really, it's about attracting the right talent and the right talent finding you. And in my view, there's still no ideal way to do that. I know there's a lot of job fairs. There's a lot of online sourcing. So companies are still trying to find a way. Everyone is still searching for each other. So yeah, better way. That's probably an idea. Better way to get the talent and the organizations to meet each other, find each other, and to do good work. Because right now it's a little bit transition with digital.
Yeah, you're right. I think this whole hiring process in this new space of remote work has definitely changed everything. And like you say, it's almost like having a network. It's not about what you know. It's about, I mean, not about who and what you know, but it's about that the agile aspect of being just, I'm going to open myself up and allowing things to come in and give it the best that I can, which I think is quite interesting. Because also, Alida, what is your point on this? I mean, do you think, I mean, from your point of view, that quality of life for you is so important? And I think the whole job, when Isabel talks about the mindset, the culture, this is very important. And if you had to recruit right now in this environment, for example.
Yeah, there is a big difference that I see in terms of mindset when I look, also back in my own history in the corporate world versus the startup world. I see the corporate world is very process focused, and the startup world is very outcome focused, and that has good reasons, because in the corporate world you have a lot of different functions, a lot of people. It seems like for everything you need to do, there is a different department that you can call up, and people are pushing work packages from one department to the other sometimes, because they don't want to be overloaded. And in the startup world, it's more like, just get it done, and you're constantly constrained of resources, and you have to be very agile, or however people want to call it, resourceful, to get the job done, because otherwise, you run out of money, and you don't get new investment, and you can close the shop. So there is a very high level of pragmatism that exists in the startup world. And I think that also comes when you look at the recruiting process. People they look more in their networks. They kind of, the right fit is very important, and the skills, I would say, they are important, but because also the job profiles change so quickly, and there's so many different roles, especially in the early phases of a startup, where you need to change from one area to the other, from one role to the other, from one activity to the other. There's this very high degree of flexibility and agility that is kind of baked into the job description, even if it's not explicitly written, but everyone knows that, the startup role will probably look very different a year later, and the corporate role might be exactly the same. So that's where I see big differences. And there is this famous saying, hire for attitude, train for skills. I feel like this is almost the other way around. When you look at the startup world versus the corporate world, sometimes the corporates, they hire for skills and they hope for the attitude, and then sometimes there is a culture that is not very conducive to a lot of change and to new ideas and to the good things that result from the agility.
You know what, Alida, that's 100%. I think it's something to do with the fact that, when we go to university or you study in college or sonst noch was, I'm speaking a little bit of German there, it's really about that, how do you call it? The page in the book. You need to go page by page. And I think, and a lot of corporates are also finding that their employees are not, that's how they know it. They don't know any other structure. And I think they need to have an entrepreneurial mindset, which is very hard to program when you've only been taught one thing at a time. And I think that is rather a rather interesting aspect to it. I mean, I think also in that light as well, the change, the having to recruit the individuals, but how do leaderships actually, in the leadership role, what mindset, what kind of tips can you both actually give in terms of how they need to start adapting? Because no more is it, I rule you from my office, I'm the king of my castle. It's more of, I have to give you the responsibility, and you need to make it work, and I'm trusting you. How does that work in terms of what hints or tips can you give to that, Isabel? What leaders need to, what mindset do the leaders need to start adapting?
We're going towards the manager coach or manager mentor. So people don't want to be managed, they want to be mentored. They want someone who is going to have empathy, who can be a nice person and just be there for them and explain how to make things happen, basically, and help them if they have questions. So I think not so much, again, managing the tasks. We're again not going so much for the process, but more about mentoring and being a resource, open door policy, and being a resource for individuals. Now, the big challenge for that is, if you work remotely, it's very important to build the trust. So when you're remote, building the trust is a big challenge because you can only do that via online tools. So you don't have this coffee. I remember when I was working with leaders in organization, where we would have chats and go by the coffee machines, and even sometimes we had breakfast, etc. So all this is going to be a bit changed now if you work from home and you don't see maybe your manager so often, or especially now with organization, it can change very quickly as well. So how do you build the trust? That's really the question. And how do you build the rapport so that people do want to work with you? Because now, especially if you look at talents in tech, and they have a lot of options to work for different companies, so why would they pick working for you? So managers have to understand now how to adapt also to the people that they hire, and understand a little bit where they're coming from, and have more of, again, I go back to have a little bit more of that social skills, so that they can adapt to people, they can coach, they can engage. So all these things that are not so much, again, making sure that the person does the task, which is obvious, but it's a little bit more than that. People expect more from their management team than that. So the bar is a little bit higher, and I think now leaders need to engage, they need to be proactive, they also need to work hand in hand with their HR teams and communication, so that they find the right fit for the organization. So yeah, it's a little bit more leadership in that sense, and less management. So more giving the long-term vision, and engage with people so that they want to work with you, and they feel that they're gaining from working with you in terms of value, and not so much, oh yeah, my manager is going to tell me what to do and slam me on the hand if it's not done, type of thing.
I agree with you. And it's almost like, I'm sure you've read the book Leaders Eat Last. I think lots of us have read the book Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. And it's exactly that sort of mentality that needs to be applied in, especially if you, like you say, it's about leading and being inspiring. And it's about it's not looking at, oh, how am I going to be seen as the best? But how are we all going to achieve the best? Because my actions are then 100% proactive and togetherness. And we don't pinpoint fingers. Aleda, what's your thought on this?
I would like to bring in a slightly different angle when it comes to the coffee and the famous water cooler conversations. So physical proximity, I think, it plays a role and is a factor, but it's not everything. So I think trust can be built also via, sharing openly and showing vulnerability, and that can totally be done over Zoom or over the phone or things like that. So, for example, I do most of my work remotely. I very rarely meet my co-founders and colleagues, but I have lengthy conversations that go beyond the business. We are all under stress, and the times and markets are difficult, of course. And then sometimes you just take a couple minutes longer, and then you ask the right questions. How do you really feel? What does this do with you? What do you think about it? You can do that one-on-one. It doesn't have to be a group session where everyone throws a pity party, but just to really listen and sort of build that human connection. It doesn't mean whether the person is in the US or Europe or in Asia. What counts for me is this true caring and this understanding, and then you find out that this person has a sort of I don't know, personal issue in their home, in their family, and whatever, and then sometimes it's enough to just listen, and maybe you are the only person that day who was listening to them, and sometimes you even find good solutions by brainstorming together, and you find a creative idea together, and that then you have built something together that is very valuable. So I think the physical element is good to have, and we very recently we had an offsite where people from 3 continents came together, and that was obviously a great experience, and I wouldn't want to miss it. But we cannot have that all the time, and we don't want to have that all the time. And I think there are good ways to make up for it by just being emotionally close and caring for your colleagues more than just for their work output.
You know what, Aleda, you basically actually touched on a very important aspect. And I think that's one thing also through the whole COVID-19, which I think a lot of people suffered. It was, of course, I think there's the elements what Isabel shared and what your points that you shared is that I think for me also the physical connection is very important, but more so being empathetic towards your fellow peers in terms of regardless if it's the office or if you're in an entrepreneur space, etc. And I think from a psychological point of view, it's also good to have it, because I found that after a while of networking a few weeks ago, that all the ideas, the visions, the creativity come out when we do connect with people. But at the same time, I was actually right when I was sort of just pre-writing this article. There were some interesting points to why home office also became, funnily enough, on the opposite side of the psychological side, is that people were happy not to go into the office to not see that colleague that they possibly did not like. which is quite interesting. Because you think, I would rather work from home than have to deal with that person and deal with them on an email and say what I have to say, and that's about it. But I think it's very interesting what you've both mentioned in this conversation this evening in terms of all the changes, the leadership mindset, the organization restructuring, the positives to it, and a lot of new ways of thinking. And of course, it's not just been it's not something new. It has been there, but it's a lot more elevated in terms of how we're moving forward in the new space. And I think quality of life is definitely something that is interesting. And I shared the other day this video with you, how to retain talent. Did you watch it, by the way?
Yes.
I thought it was very interesting, and I really just want to reiterate what he actually discussed there, going back to the Industrial Revolution, where how it was back then, where your job was important. You didn't dare lose your job. You held on to it. These were our great-great-great-grandfathers. You worked hard, and even if your boss was mean, you would practically stay and work hard and prove yourself. And then the next generation came along, which we know, of course, as the information generation, where they had opportunity and options. And of course, they want standard of living. They wanted to give their offspring the best that they can, live their lifestyle, create a world where they can succeed and be seen. And if they got noticed, they also weren't a very loyal generation, because they ended up jumping jobs, because the generation before stayed. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I see people would stay in their job till they are 50, 60, and that is a whole 30 or 40 years of their lives. And then information age, people just stay, it actually dropped 10, 5. Okay, the longest they stay in a company is 2 years. And then 2008 came. It was the recession. It was a complete change. Digital came into play, and it became this whole digital nomad world. And I think also entrepreneurship started to sort of take shape. And hello, here we are, social and digital world, as we all are. And suddenly we said, no, but sorry, I'm not going to go work for a boss that's mean to me. And no, actually, I don't necessarily want to job hunt. I want quality of life. I want to know when I can work. I want to get the praise. I want to get the raise. And if it doesn't suit me, I will go. And I would rather work for less. I think that is kind of a very interesting sort of mindset to put into place. I think we had a little bit of a discussion on that earlier. But I think what's also very interesting is that, when I was watching this video, the CEO was speaking to this recruiter or talent manager, and he said, listen, I'm training these individuals. They're there, they come, they stay 6 months to a year. Maybe I need to give them a structured 3-year contract. And he said, it's not going to work. So how do we train these generations there? How are we going to maintain this? I mean, and if we all saying if there's 23% or 80% of the population globally saying, I will happily work a 3-day week, is this a pro or a con? I mean, if we all want to have this lifestyle, and if we're all happy to take that pay cut, I mean, is this a pro or a con? I mean, I think that's quite interesting. What do you both think on that?
Maybe I can go first. Well, it's interesting that you say this, because I really think that's the trend right now, is that when people get a contract, they want to dictate their options. So I want to work, as you say, 3 days or 4 days. So for me, it's a little bit shocking, because I'm not used to seeing that so much, but it's grown since COVID. It's really grown where people want to dictate. Now, my first thing is, are we going towards, because if you can't hire as a company, if you can't hire people, and it's becoming difficult, and are we going to, of course, a lot of countries now, I believe in Dubai or, the Emirates, now it's 4-day work week. And I think other countries also approve that. So that's the first step. But then how do we work around that? Is that going to be enough? Or, because in my view, work still needs to be done. So either it gets done by humans that come to work 5 days, 6, 7 days, sometimes a week, in some organizations or some businesses like restaurants, people need to work on the weekends. So the work still needs to be done. So now what I see coming, and again, that's my opinion, it's only what I believe might happen, is that automation will kick in. So companies, especially startups, they'll say we can't afford to have someone work so little and the output is not so great. So why don't we automate it? We already see a lot of automation when you go to the grocery store. You just check yourself out basically, and there's no clerk there most of the time. Or actually, in a lot of stores, it's like this. We can imagine that there's more automation also going on in other industries. And you'll be doing everything yourself because companies won't have people there. So in certain industries, I think they will wonder, what do we do if we want to have a business, but we can't afford to have the human resources part of it? So, what is the extent that people can dictate what they want? Because the whole scenario of I want to get paid 100,000 and work 1 hour a week, it's not sustainable. I don't think so. Maybe someone has the magical formula, but in my view, it's not sustainable. So what I see coming, and again, that's what I believe, but it might be different, is that companies and especially startups will start thinking about automation and doing things without a lot. And we see that's why we see so many startups, very agile, very little staff, and they produce a lot. And there's a lot of business models like this that have exploded in the last years. They're very lean. They don't have a lot of human resources, but the output is excellent and they make millions. So maybe that's the trend, is that we'll see more of that, in my view.
Alada?
I agree with Isabel on the automation part, and I would also add that there's also the outsourcing part. After COVID, more easily than ever, we can work with remote resources. It has dawned on everyone that it really doesn't matter if someone is sitting in India or in Basel or in London. The important part is the output, and then of course there are always these cultural issues, the communication issues, and it is easier to get work done if you sit next to each other and to follow up and look over your shoulder and ask your colleague. But we are more and more getting used to digital communication channels, and outsourcing is, I think, today more viable than ever. Now, when it comes to how to retain talent and how to differentiate between the wishful thinking, the 100K for an hour versus the 3-hour work week and everything that's in between. After all, it's still a labor market. So people come and sell a certain amount of time, of lifetime, and a certain amount of accomplishment within that time. And, after a certain period, probation period tends to be 3 months or shorter sometimes in Switzerland and also other countries. So that's around that period, where people can prove, okay, is the work that I'm delivering good enough for the company to retain me? But then also from the other side, I'm hearing more and more stories from the employees that they are quitting in the probation period because they don't like the work environment that they find themselves in. And I think there is a leveling process where, the more skills you have, the better you are, the more specialized, the more flexible you are, the more valuable you are as an employee, the more negotiating power you have, both before you start the job, but then also while you are in the job. You can say, especially now I hear it from friends in IT and those kind of technical jobs where they say, I didn't like that company, and I had like 20 or 30 offers coming at me via LinkedIn, to do the same role for more money in a different place, but the different place was my home office. So it didn't make a big difference. I think, the more skilled and valuable you are, the more choice you have eventually.
I find that so interesting. I really, really do, because it's true. And actually, I'm laughing because that is exactly what's happening in today's generation, is that what we are talking about, the social, digital generation, where jobs are being thrown at you. People are coming from behind the scenes. And I had this conversation at an event, and he was saying to me, this individual that I spoke to, that no longer is the loyalty there, because job offers are being thrown into you on LinkedIn, on social, your friends are forwarding it to you. So you're jumping ship. If it's better the pay, better the culture, better the everything. It's just about jumping all the time. And actually, another funny story was that I actually read on LinkedIn a few days ago was about also organization in Zurich training up a Generation Z candidate who wanted to obviously do the weiterbildung and alles, and then 2 weeks later said, nope, sorry, not interested. Because again, it's this new culture of we want the quality of life. And I think you've both mentioned very interesting points on the automation, the human factor, how this is going to play a big role in the future and how this is going to adapt. That's rather interesting. And I hope for the best for all of us, actually, because essentially that's why we're all jumping into entrepreneurship, because then we don't have to do anything but work, and everybody else is just digging into what is of importance to them to a certain degree. But I just want to thank both of you for your interesting points this evening on the future of new work, how it's changing, the mindset that we have to adapt, what we as leaders have to do in terms of not managing but co-creating. Is there any last points that you both would like to share to everyone that has tuned in?
I would like to jump in on your last comment. When you say why so many people go into startups and entrepreneurship, oftentimes there is a very rosy picture painted. Oh, I'm going to do my own thing and then I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And then you wake up to the reality, you need to run after clients, after investors. You don't have a steady income, it's very stressful, and you have to be extremely resourceful and, tap everyone to get ahead. And that, I think it's a life that some people like, and I definitely like. I'm that hustler type of guy who, always comes up with some new ideas, and even if it's very grim, then I try to find the bright side of it. But then for other people, a corporate job is much better, much less stressful, and I just wanted to point out that just because you are more flexible in a startup, it doesn't mean that it's less stressful. And this is sometimes easily confused when it comes to the culture that is propagated. Oh, freedom and fun and table soccer and free drinks and all those things, but you have to get to that stage first, and go the first couple funding rounds and become a semi big organization until you have that cushion. And up to then you have to hustle quite a bit, and it's always uncertain, and it's not easy, but it's very rewarding on the way up if you're successful. And if not, then you learned a lot of life lessons, I would say.
Well, Alaja, I absolutely agree with you. I think with everything that we do in life, entrepreneurship is no easy journey. I think it really is about the hard work, and like you say, it's everyone thinks it's the rosy picture and the white picket fence and everything else. It's not about that. Isabel,
Yeah, and
add on to this.
Whether you go for building your own thing or co-creating with someone or working for a company, you need to have skills. You need to develop your skills. So it's not like you can just go and decide to do something out of thin air. And I usually talk with a lot of individuals about that. It's like, what is your skill? What do you know how to do well? And where do you have experience? So I think sometimes people, again, they see social media and everyone can become someone. You have to build up your potential. You have to build up your skill set and learn. And how do you learn? You learn via working for a while, even for somebody else, so that you have the basis. And then when you're trained and you have knowledge, then you can decide, maybe you can have more flexibility yourself also on how you want to deliver it, whether it be as a consultant in a startup but you need to have that. And I think that's where a lot of people sometimes are a little bit too light on that part. They want to do a lot of things, but first you have to build your foundation, so to say. So my message would be, build a solid foundation. What is it that you love to do? Get trained in that, build up in that, and then you'll become someone, I call that a go-to person. You'll become the expert in your field, and the person that gets either hired or you start your own thing, but you build up your foundation.
No, absolutely. I agree with you both. Thank you so much for the valuable insight and thought leadership around this topic of, home office, new work, skill sets, organizations. I think it's definitely going to be an interesting journey to see what happens in the next 10 years. And I mean, we've been through quite a lot. I just have to say that I'm really happy that we are offline again in terms of events and people connect. Isabel, hopefully we will see us soon. Alada, I'm sure we will also see us soon sometime at some offline events. But thank you again for joining tonight. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to seeing you both in the near future. And here is to home office, remote working. In fact, I have to admit, I'm 2 months away. And what will I be doing? Remote working. Isn't that just the beauty of this new mindset? And it's almost a natural. It's not even, I don't feel guilty. It's what it is.
Well, you can still be very
You don't
efficient.
have to.
Quality of life. We're all choosing quality of life over, and it's exactly that. Would you just take a complete pay cut in order to have a quality of life?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so.
I have. So I'm living proof.
Well, it's not just the pay cut. I think it's knowing who you are and what your needs are. And everyone is different. So once you know who you are and what your needs are, it's a little bit easier then to make decisions because you know what's right for you and what's not. You just don't do it.
I think we've learned a lot through COVID, though, because if it wasn't for COVID, we would all still be in this rat race mindset of, I have to be, I want to be, I need to be the best, I need to be, and the list goes on. And there's nothing wrong. And I think for me also, when I look at everything, achievement and success for me is when I've completed something and it created a positive outcome. That's how I look at it.
Exactly. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But everyone has their own definition of what they believe is successful. So that could also be argued, but
no, 100%. It all depends which generation we fall in. I definitely fall into the social and digital generation, most certainly not in the information age or the industrial age. But thank you so much for taking the time out. This is Nina again from Future Female Zurich, where we had the discussion on the future of new work with Isabel Litzler and Alada Tapalia. Thank you so much and goodbye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.